Good morning, everybody. I want to talk about a very interesting topic that you know has come up, and if you read the news or follow the news across the globe, two, three words that come up very often, especially in Indian context: secular, intellectual, and pseudo-intellectual. So I wanted to share with you all my thoughts, my definition, and it's not going to be a bookish definition. It's probably a definition that I have, you know, observed, and what you can call a practical definition. And I'll pick one at a time, all three. So let me start with intellectual. So who's considered an intellectual, or who's given the tag of an intellectual or branded as an intellectual? And what do you mean by intellectual? Right? So if you look at the root of the word, it's intellect. Anybody, in my practical definition, I haven't opened the dictionary and all those things, so don't compare me line by line. But my understanding of intellectual is somebody who can use his intellect, can जिसको हिंदी में word विवेक use किया गया है, and for any given situation, any given attribute, any given subject, can think through it as holistically as possible. Now the operating word is holistically. And holistically means that you should be able to look at a particular problem and in its entirety from all angles, as they say, or 360. Now, how many people truly have a mind that is unbiased 100% of the time and can be very objective about everything or anything? Very rare. You'll find, one in a billion maybe. And those are rare gems that truly sort of stand out and sort of become leaders, or they give a shape to the humanity, if you will, or a sense of direction to humanity. So that's my definition of intellectual. Now there are, as anything, I always believe there is no true black or true white. There are always shades of gray or various colors in between. To a certain degree, everybody is an intellectual. I haven't found anybody who doesn't have, at least at a very basic level, of a mind that can see through the problem, make a decision. In some others' perspective, that decision might be right or wrong, but at least he's able to decide between two options. Let's just put it between, like, if you have to choose between X and Y, everybody will choose either X or Y, and they'll give you various reasons for it. Because the world exists in duality, right? It doesn't exist in a unity. At a core level it does, but existence as we perceive, as we see, and as we live through, is always a choice between X and Y. The whole computer science is based on it. Most of the mathematical logic, philosophy is based on, narrowing to your option down between two and then picking one based on the best arguments, the best data points, and best analysis that you can come up with. So in the shades of intellect, everybody is intellectual. It's just the varying degrees. Some at degree 1, some at degree 100. And there are always going to be outliers, perfect saints, Mahatmas, sons who would be at 100, and they'll be absolutely impartial. They'll have absolute, sort of core understanding of what the issue is, and they'll always make the right decision. And at the level 0, level 1, somebody who's absolutely selfish, can only think of himself, live at a very gross physical level, and is only living for survival. And then the shades in between. So that's my definition of an intellectual. So, when somebody is branded, he's an intellectual, he's just a different degree. And then I'll further differentiate it on another dimension. So that's one stack of shades of intellect, 0 to 100, and in a two dimension. In a third dimension space, the third dimension that will come in, you could be level 90 on one attribute, and you could be level 30 on another attribute. And now, who's to judge how many attributes are there? There are millions of attributes. So you could be, let's say, on LGBTQ subject, you could be a conservative. You could have a very different perspective. And for someone else who was in that category, who will think very differently than you, in your opinion. Or for that matter, pick any dimension. That was a dimension on sexuality, but you can pick any dimension on, how to go about your day, how to discipline yourself, or how to go about a certain task. And everybody will have a different opinion. So in my point of view, there are three if you just limit the discussion in three dimensionality, on two dimension it's various degree of intellect, the depth of it, and in three dimension intellectual variation that will come in on various facet of life, call it attribute of life or call it dimension. So that's my definition of intellectual. So when you see someone and people judge, the whole society or the globe exists on judgment. We all judge. And you have to judge to make decisions, and to make decision you have to judge. So based on your intellect, you are going to give everybody, and we do it subconsciously. We constantly are ranking dimensions. We are constantly ranking people. We are constantly ranking options, and that's how we are making decisions. So keep that in mind. And there is nobody who says I'm totally impartial, I don't have a point of view, or I don't judge, and I live unconditionally in a perfect state of bliss. In perfect life, it doesn't happen. Or in practical life, it doesn't happen. In perfect life, yes, if you're a Jesus or Krishna or Ram, it might exist. So that's my take on intellect. I'll touch the topic of secular or pseudo-intellectual next. Let me now touch the topic of connected to intellectual is what I call pseudo-intellectual. Now that's a very funny sort of word, and can mean something different to everyone. But what you are trying to say is that you don't agree with someone on his point of view around a certain attribute, and you are judging that person to say, unless and until he has the same definition as you on that particular attribute, you're going to brand somebody as pseudo. Pseudo means that you're pretending to be a holder of a point of view which that person thinks is perfect, but in your view, it's imperfect. So I think it's a derogatory term, it's a demeaning term, because either you are an intellectual at various degree and various attribute, and everybody is. So nobody can pretend to be an intellectual. You might have a point of view, so you might be on a scale of 0 to 100, let's say at 10, but you do have a point of view. Now somebody who's at level 90 might brand the person below his rank as a pseudo, or maybe above his rank as pseudo, who knows, right? Whether you have a sense of insecurity, so you might brand the person above your with a different point of view. So as long as, I think pseudo-intellectual is a very tricky thing, depending on your self-belief, your confidence and your comfort in yourself. Either you're going to brand somebody who is below your rank as pseudo or above, or you are just going to sort of hold on to your point of view as the perfect intellectual point of view and everybody else not. In my practical life, no. Variations exist, variability exists, differentiation exists, but everybody is an intellectual at various degrees on various dimensions. So that's my take on pseudo and the whole meaning of it. I'm making this video in a very lighter vein, so please don't take it seriously. I just wanted to sort of create a discussion or a samvad around these three words that have been coming up in all the debates, discussions, readings, especially on noisy channels, or you know what I'm talking about. And the third thing is secularism, right? So what is secular? Once again, it's very closely aligned to my definition of intellectual. So secular is a degree of acceptance. That's one way to look at it, of another's point of view, of another's, and that point of view could be your way of belief, or your way of existence, and how you justify that belief or how you justify that existence. So don't narrow it just in religiosity sense, but I would say expand it to every attribute or dimension, and the word secular sort of holds true. But if you narrow the definition down, and I think most of the time in Indian debates and dialogues and discussions, it's used in the religiosity sense. And the common definition or common understanding how people use it, explaining it, and then I'll sort of give you my point of view on it, is that a secular is supposed to be someone, and it's mostly used in Hindu parlance, that and now I'm being very specific to Indian context now. The secular is someone who will accept all the other faiths and religion and will not have an opinion on there's religiosity, and is supposed to accept no matter what they do, how good or how bad. So, for an example, and this is a controversial example, but being very specific, that if a Muslim young man shoots 10 people, people will brand him terrorist. But if a Hindu will call him terrorist, then suddenly people will, from the other community, Muslim community, will start to call that Hindu that you are non-secular now. But if a Hindu kills, anybody, Muslims will immediately brand him. Now lately, they'll say, "Oh, he's a Sanghi or, Hindu fundamentalist," and that branding will go on him. So what was happening, I think, in the last 30, 40 years in Indian context, the word secular was being imposed on the Hindu mass or population, who were not supposed to call out the unacceptable practices or unacceptable behavior of the Muslim community. And I'm being very particular about here, because I don't think it was holding true when it came to the relationship between the Hindu community or Christian or Sikh or anybody. Well, Sikh, Jain, and they're all part of Hindu parlance. But let's say Hindu Christian and Hindu Muslim. And if I just take a degree farther to it, so maybe it was imposed on polytheistic practitioners, which is majority Hindu, against the Abrahamic practitioners of religion, which is Christianity and Muslim. And you only hear this word in an Indian context. Actually, this word never comes up in US or to a certain extent, I would say, even in Europe. You don't hear that in their press applied to their own culture. You read about this word in Western press, but applied to Indian context. So I think it has a lot to do with our history, with our post-47, our policies and structures, and how this word was sort of started to be, how this word became used in the common language, and in specific dimensions, how it started to got used. So the word is, now any word does not is religious specific or whatnot. It's just a word and should be used in, any. So it should be equally applied to Muslims, and they should be equally accepting, and more than accepting, they should be equally respecting of the others. And I would say that's when true secularism comes in. Now, this is in the English domain that these words are used and sort of applied, and when they are used, they're interpreted in a certain way. But if you go to the rural life of India, where I come from, a village, and my grandfather and everybody in the village, none of them were very fluent in English. They might know a word here or there, too, picked up on TV or radio or whatnot. But in those villages, there were people from every community who lived. They were Muslims, they were Hindus, they were, every shape. No Christian, I would say, till this whole conversion thing started in India. But nobody ever used the word secular, and everybody was living perfectly harmoniously. And people were accepting of each other, people respected each other's faith, people will give each other space. And I'm being truly honest, I did see Muslims celebrating Diwali and Holi, just like, on their Eid and all, they would give, distribute sweets to the Hindu families. So that was a practical way of living secular world. And I think by definition and by practice, Hindus for thousands of years, or Sanatani for thousands of years, have been very accepting of others' faith and practices of life. And primarily because within Hinduism or Sanatan, there are 85 lakh gods, and everybody can create a god anywhere, on a tree or a rock or anything. Because being a polytheistic practitioners of life, it's considered that the god exists in everything, and what you see out there is just as much part of you and is all part of just same creator. So for them, calling people as people Devta is no different than calling some roundish rock as Ganpati. And you see all those rocks painted various colors in Indian villages and communities. So for them, that was never an issue. But for political reasons, this word has been, if I may use the word, bastardized, has been misused, hijacked, and used to sort of brand certain people for certain things. And then vote bank politics and everything that plays around it. So that's been my understanding of this whole the debate around secularism, and it's mostly emphasized to sort of emphasize that in India, the post-partition, post 1947, to kind of erase the memory or the hardship or the pain that India went through and during partition, and to kind of keep the Sanatani and the Hindu majority in India to kind of ignorant about it, so that the current population and the current Muslims who live in India are close to 20-25%, can continue to sort of behave ignorant about how they contributed towards the partition. And I think Congress and the subsequent governments for the last 50-60 years played a significant role in creating that what I call artificial amnesia in the society. Now, as internet and to a certain extent the whole Hindu thoughts have started to revive, have started to gain traction around figuring out who they are, their identity, their history, their relationship to the past, and then how do they want to sort of be known and recognized in the future. As that awakening is starting to take place, this what I call artificial amnesia is starting to sort of erode. And because of that, there is too much of noise and cacophony around this whole secularism, secular debate. And you see the implications of that when during 1977 or 76, when Indira Gandhi pushed, in the preamble, the word secular and socialist. Both those words, to be honest, if you look around the world, are considered, at least in the West, in America, socialism is considered untouchable. Is the word that's associated with sort of like a cousin of communism. And in fact, if you keep American politics, keep a tab of it, especially during the presidential debate, Republicans always blame Democrats of trying to bring socialism to America, and it's considered as anathema here. Suppose you're not supposed to even, consider that thing. And the most socialist of the socialist country, under the influence that Nehru and Indira sort of did all this, the Britain is as capitalist as it comes, and Margaret Thatcher sort of demolished the whole, the socialist philosophy. And then within socialism and capitalism, there are shades, and we can talk about it in the subsequent discussions and dialogue. So just limiting to intellectuals, pseudo intellectual, and then socialism. That was my take on it. So double click in your own mind and read up on this. What the whole secularism, who is it sort of, pasted on, and then how they want to kind of leverage the narrative around it to kind of take advantage from others for the political and the vote bank. So that's where I would love to stop, making it in English because it's mostly English speaking population, what I call urban class, that sort of uses these words quite a bit, and hence this talk in English. So please let me know your thoughts and comments. You might not agree with my definition. You might not agree with what my sort of understanding of these three words are. So would love to hear from you all and then take it further. Thanks. Bye.